Welcome to the Noodle Podcast. We are Kate and Max and we love noodling on what we've learned by accident. This podcast is a space where we share how we get the best out of ourselves and the people we've worked with. And in today's episode we discuss what our past disappointments have taught us about ourselves, other people, and how long you should stay at a pity party before finding the courage to leave.
Max.
Kate?
What would you say if I told you I'm not angry with you, I'm just disappointed?
Well, obviously suppressing a nervous giggle over the top of that, because you're saying it, but it would just make me feel a bit sick.
Would it?
And a bit like I am 9, maybe. My maths, my teacher was very disappointed with me because I couldn't play fizz buzz. Never been able to do fractions when under pressure since.
Ah, okay. I think I understand. It's obviously shaped who you are as a person.
Yes, it's that moment, isn't it, where you get put, the teacher sort of says they're disappointed in you. Or it's in your school report.
Yes.
Very disappointed in Kate.
Yeah.
She could do so much better.
Not achieving her potential.
Yeah.
It's horrible, isn't it? It makes my toes curl thinking about it. And yet, disappointment is a thing that we feel. And how do you share that? When do you share it? If it's with people you're working with.
Yes. And how do you share in a way that is productive?
Yeah.
Rather than debilitating.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to be really careful with it.
Here's a clue. Don't use the word disappointed.
Okay, what would you say instead?
So, what would I say instead?
I think you need to feel it first. Feel the disappointment.
Yes.
And then go, what is it about this?
Yeah.
Is it me? Is it them? Is it the situation?
Yeah.
What do I want to be different? There's a gap usually between what you want and what's happening. Yeah. And in that gap is where the disappointment lies. Yes. So it's easier to look at what you had hoped for. Well, it's less controversial, I think, isn't it? It's going to land better with somebody if you're giving feedback. If you're able to be specific. Here's the thing that I wanted. Here's what's happening. What are we going to do about that?
I think overall the word disappointed sounds very judgy, doesn't it? Like, I'm disappointed in you as a whole person. See, you've let me down.
Yeah.
Rather than this thing didn't turn out how I'd expected. Your contribution to it was positive here, maybe different here, could have here. It's more about, rather than disappointed, it's just saying, that didn't work out how we planned, or that didn't go how we expected. I think expected is a good one. Expectations. And then exploring what's the gap between what we expected to happen and what really happened.
Yes. And
what were the factors in that?
Yes. There's a good book called How to Give Feedback, Even When It's Not Wanted. And that encourages you to think about not finding blame, not blaming yourself, not blaming the other person, but where this thing has not come up to scratch, just thinking about what your contribution to that might have been. Even if it's just a little bit. I should have been more available before you went ahead and maybe I said something in the heat of the moment and actually that wasn't what I meant, and you've done something as a result.
That comes into my pie chart of responsibility that I like to use when people over-own things as well. Is, okay, so you can take some responsibility, but let's go through the pie chart of responsibility. How many other factors were there? So that's good as well for saying, yes, take some, but also not for overdoing it, which is there are other factors, so what else? Yeah.
When you think about disappointment, there can be external factors, there can be internal factors. Again, it's quite useful if you're in that pit of feeling very, very uncomfortable. What is it? Is it something outside of my control? Is it within my control? Is it to do with a story that I tell myself? I didn't get a promotion once. Only once.
Really? I can't believe that. Tell me more.
It was a job that I had been doing. I'd been acting in.
Yeah. Acting in, acting up.
Yeah.
Not acting out, though. I hope.
No, I don't think so. My boss at the time had given me every indication that this was going to be my role. I went for the interview. My boss at the time had told me it's just a formality. And then I guess it might have been awkward for him, but he did have to tell me I hadn't got the job. And I was really, really disappointed. And that was disappointed in myself, but I was furious with.
Yes, of course.
Feeling like I'd been on this path that now wasn't open to me. It was actually, it was embarrassing as well as disappointing. How could I go back to my team now? How could I go back to the job that I had been doing beforehand and not have this? I think people end up in that situation. But in disappointment, there's usually, what have we learned from this?
Yeah, completely.
And if there's a way, it's not like bat it away. It's more, what does this tell me?
Well, in the moment, and also when you look back in the rearview mirror. I mean, so what happened next, I guess, is my question.
Yeah.
What did you do next?
It was quite a big one. My then husband had been offered a job in a different country, in Scotland. We were living in England. It was a big deal. I liked the job I was doing, but when I didn't get this promotion, it freed me up to think about that. I think I'm going to have to leave. I actually, not by throwing my toys out the pram, but there was something else I could do. And it spurred me on to getting a different job, moving country. And that ended up being one of the best things I ever did. The opportunities that became open to me then, I wouldn't have taken if that disappointment hadn't happened and forced me to make quite a big decision.
I think it's often the case, isn't it, when you look at, if you do the sort of career mapping thing, and you're looking at your lows and highs in your career, is very often from a low comes a high. I can think about, and it's interesting what you were saying about embarrassment, is I remember taking a job where it was going to be a significant life change. We were moving to another city. We were moving nearer to, we go on holiday a lot in Wales, and we were going to be moving nearer so we could go more often. And this was going to be the great new job. We were moving house. It was going to, I'd sold the story. I'd painted run the movie, painted the pic, done all of that.
Yes.
5 weeks in, I got made redundant.
No. Yeah. That's awful.
Thanks. Yeah, it was.
Sorry. I mean,
sat in the
what
bath,
did you learn?
Sat in the bath and cried, if that's not an image that's a little bit too unsettling. And then from there, you have to decide how long you're going to sit in the pit of despair.
Yes, how long we're here for. Yeah.
And what do you call it? A pity party.
Yes. How long is this pity party going to be?
Because you need to feel it. You're right.
Yeah.
You need to feel it to work out why it's important and what the meaning is in it, before you then decide how to move on.
Yeah.
Or, as I often think I do, is I make the decisions to do something and work out what it means later.
Okay.
So I don't try and spend too long in feeling rubbish.
You have faith and confidence. This will change. This will pass. It will become something else.
Mm-hmm.
In endings, there are beginnings, whether they're chosen or not.
Yeah.
I think with disappointment, emotions like disappointment or anger or frustration, we're often encouraged to not feel those or not show those. But there is information in those emotions. And with disappointment, I think it shows that you care.
Yeah, completely.
It shows that you want something. And okay, maybe this isn't the path. So if it's still important to you, how else can you do that? So the sooner you can sort of go, okay, what is the next step, rather than staying in this sense of it's not worked out. When you are disappointed in somebody else or something else, that's a tricky one, isn't it? That can keep on going for quite a long time.
And I think that links to one of our other favourite people that we quote, or certainly one of mine, Brené Brown, when she talks about the unexpressed. So sometimes there's disappointment in others and you haven't shared with them what it is that you want or the movie that you've run that involves them, and then they let you down. But they weren't told they had a bit part to play in your movie that was supposed to be like this or like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think to avoid disappointment, more conversation up front about what are you stepping into, what are you wanting from this situation, whether it's the weekend that's coming up or it's the piece of work or it's the next 6 months of someone's career. If you don't have that conversation, then you're both running your own versions of that movie. You'll get to the end and you're going to have difference, aren't you?
So communication is going to be a really big factor in making sure everyone's on the same page. You're going to lessen the likelihood of that disappointment happening. It's not always the case that communication or clarity will avoid that sense of they haven't come up to meet what you need to happen. I took a massive hiring risk once when I recruited somebody who had all sorts of issues and had been passed around from team to team to team, and ended up with me, and the person who he'd worked with before didn't tell me what his issues were. And some of his problems were that he was covering up the fact that he didn't have the capability or the competence for what was required. And that was quite a tricky thing to prove. But it was disappointing when I realised this is not going to be the person who makes the team work.
Yeah.
And actually I was spending a lot of time trying to help him and get there, and everybody was helping, and it just wasn't working. That was disappointing on a lot of levels.
Yeah. Because you're still trying to help him to find the right route or to do his best work or whatever it is, but also you're still kind of going, but it isn't working here or in this team or... Yeah.
And in that situation, I really think about perceptual positions. So that concept of what does this look like from their perspective, from your perspective, and if you were a movie camera and could pull out and say what's going on here. So from his perspective, what was really interesting was he genuinely felt that he was an asset to every team that he went to. His story for himself was, I've got so many skills that people keep on asking me to go and join their team.
I see.
From my perspective, it was...
He was very good at reframing then.
Whoever managed him was like, oh no, this is not working. I need to... I've got a different project for you to work on and it's over there. Bye. And then from the bigger picture, I don't know what... I still struggle. What might that other perspective have been? Something like we want everyone to do their best and we just haven't found the right shape for their jigsaw piece to fit yet.
But that links for me with whatever happens whenever you go for a job. It's very rare when you go for a job for it to be what it was sold, right? So you have a movie that you run in your head, which is when I get this job, and then the person selling you the job is selling the Disney movie. It's going to be amazing. It's fantastic here. Even if you say it's tough, or this is tricky, or this is challenging, you're still doing it in a positive light. And then when you arrive, there's a bit of a gap.
This is not what was being sold to me.
No one's ever said, this job is exactly what they sold me. In fact, it's just, there's fireworks going off all the time, party. Yeah, there's always a gap, isn't there?
Yes.
And it's how you handle it.
It is. So I think a lot of people learn by accident that disappointment, unfortunately, is the name of the game. It comes with so many different working situations, but it's what you do with it that counts.
Yes.
So, yeah, do you lean into it? Do you learn quickly from it? What does it tell you when you look in the rearview mirror? What do you realise that you've learned that you couldn't possibly have realised?
Yes. So, actually, a very rich experience.
Yeah.
If you can tell yourself that when you're in the pit of despair.
And I think I'm going to end with this because I think we're almost at time, but if you find that our last topic for our last episode was decision making. If you find that you're sitting still with something, you're not making a decision because you're afraid that you're going to make a mistake, that there is risk in every decision. What's the worst that can happen? Let's say it doesn't quite work out. Can you already have your plan B ready? Can you think about, okay, so what if I hate the job that I'm doing, but I've stuck with it for so long because it pays well, I'm supporting my family, whatever it is. But what if I take another job and that's even worse than this job? And then what? What will you do? You'll have learned something. You can have your plan B ready. So maybe disappointment is just something to expect and recognise that you get something from it as well, the highs and the lows. Yeah.
So noodles then?
Noodles.
Well, you've already said perceptual positions. That's important.
Yeah.
Circles of influence, making sure you are in the position of concentrating on what you can do or influence, not what you can't. So you're allowed to feel sorry for yourself for a little while, but then get over the disappointment bit of, I can't change this or that, but I can do this.
Learned optimism. That's kind of about getting over the wall, isn't it? The wall will happen. You can't necessarily just knock your way through it. So what is it that you need to help you get out of the pit of despair?
And then giving feedback or asking for feedback. And that will mean that you reduce the chances of disappointing other people Or being disappointed.
Or acting like you're the parent or the teacher, when actually it should be an adult conversation.
Completely.
Everyone benefits if you go there rather than avoid it.
Yeah.
If it's done in the right way. Max, I'm not really disappointed in you when I said that.
For you.
Not today, anyway. I'm really not. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Interesting. I think there's hope, isn't there? Even when you're feeling those bad feelings, it is going to turn into something else. It's going to be all right.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers.
You can find a reminder of the concepts and noodles we've mentioned in this episode's blurb and get daily snippets on Instagram at noodle_space. Don't forget to subscribe, share and leave us a review. We love hearing your stories too on the chat at www.noodle.space.